Welcome everyone. In this lecture, we are going to study the translation process. Okay. Uh, what do you mean by the translation? What is need to be translated? Uh, we are going to study this topic from programmer point of view. Okay. When a programmer writes a program, or when a software engineer is trying to create a software, they need to write the source code. They need to write some text, or they need to write the programming code, which is known as the source code, right? Conversion from the source code to binary code or machine language is known as translation. Okay, I write it wrongly, but it is translation. So um, why we need to translate? The reason for needing translation is computer understand only machine language. What is machine language? Machine language is a binary number which is composed of 0 and 1, because computer works using power supply. So computer can understand only 0 and 1. So programming using 0 and 1 is very difficult. Therefore, they created some programming language where we can write the software. So those source code needs to be translated into machine language in order for the computer to uh, execute or to run, whether it may be a games, or whether it may be applications, or it may be operating system. Everything needs to be translated into the machine language. All right, so translation is performed by translator. Okay, the translators, there are two popular translator. One is compiler and another one is interpreter, which we are going to study in details. So this picture, or this diagram is taken from your textbook. We have the program, which is usually the source code, and from this program the translation takes place. Okay, here is the translation. So after the translation, it produced binary form. Binary means it is composed of 0 and 1, 1, 0, something like this. Only 0 and 1, which is understood by computer. Then this binary code can be executed. It can be run. So this is the final destination and the final goal. Execution is the final destination and the final goal. Alright? I hope you understand. Let me repeat in miso. Hemi klasa hian kan thil tumper tur chu programming language te kha execute thei turin ran kan tum don ta ni. Chuan hemi hi hemi hi source software engineering thil azia huna khan. Software engineer in source code programming code azia ho kha computer in asia thiam tur zonga translate ngai ta chu translator ho in an thok ta ni. Translator hi pahni kan neya compiler le interpreter ani a chung ho chu details in consider don ani chu Python programming kan zir dona chu mi Python programming kan zir na tura hian engtin nge kha programming code Python code izia kha computer in a lo hriat thiam ti kha I hriat chian nan hian he chapter hi he lecture hi apoimo hle ani. All right, let's go to the next slide. First of all, we need to study the compilation process. As in the previous slide, I have told you that there are two types of translator. The first one is compiler and the second one is interpreter. We are going to study first what is the compiler. So the compilation process first. In the compilation process, we have the preprocessor. After that, we have the compilation, and after that we have the analysis, and we have the synthesis. After that, the assembly part, and we have the linking loading, and the next will be execution. All right, here is this picture is taken from your textbook. As per this picture, you, the programmer, will write, even though you are a student, you have to write the Python code, which is known as the source code, and it will go to the analysis phase after writing the code. After that analysis phase, it will go to synthesis phase again. Then assembly language assembler will do the work and it will produce the object code. And after this object code, the linker will do its job. It will link all the standard libraries, user library, object code, and then it will produce executable which can be run in the computer. This is the compilation process. We are going to study one by one again. So first of all, what is the preprocessor? The preprocessor phase remove extra such as comments from the source code and add all that is to be added or expanded so that the code is completely ready for the next phase. In computer programming, we are going to write comments which will be important for the software engineer or the source code writer, but it will not be important for the computer. So those things have to be removed from this pre-processing steps. Okay. Then after removing all the non-necessary things or documentation things, uh, only the important things will be carried out to the next phase. So the phase in which the steps in which we remove the comments, extra comments, and documentations, etc., are known as the pre-processing phase. All right, the next one is analysis phase. In this analysis phase, we have the front, this is known as the front end phase, and it identifies all the tokens in the source code. Okay, identifies all the tokens. What are the words which is used in the programming code? And what are the operators which are used in the code like plus, minus, etc. And it will create a symbol table with it. Okay, all the tokens will have a symbol table. So this phase is known as the analysis phase. The next one is the synthesis phase. In the synthesis phase, uh, the the source code or the source code including this the symbol table will be parsed, will be read. Okay, will be read, and it will generate a syntax tree out of it, a syntax tree. Okay, syntax tree will be in the form of branches. For example, your source code will branch depending on the conditions. Okay, so it will generate the syntax tree. And once the code is error free, if there is no error, the compiler will convert the source code into intermediate code. Okay, the compiler will convert the source code into intermediate code after these two synthesis and analysis phase. Now let's go to the next one. The next one is assembly phase. In this phase, um, all the intermediate codes are received from the previous stages, and those are converted into object code. From intermediate code, it is converted into object code. Object code is a form of machine code. Okay, when you say object code, it is a form of machine code. This phase does the same work as assembler. Okay, this phase is performing the same job as the assembler. It will convert the assembly code into binary or machine code. So this is known as the assembly phase. And the last phase is linking and loading phase in compilation process. In this phase, all the required libraries are linked with the object code. The source code will be referring to some other code which is already existing. Those are known as library codes, and it will be linked together with the object code. And this linking is performed by a program which is known as linker, which comes with the compiler. All right. Therefore, the code has become executable. The code has become runnable, which can be run in the computer. Then after that, the loader part will load the executable modules into the memory for execution. The loader will be necessary only when you want to run the program. Okay, if it is not required to run the program, yeah, you may not need to load it. Okay, so after that, the program you have written will be executed by the computer. I hope it's clear. If it is not clear, you can ask me anytime in WhatsApp. Okay, so let's go to the next step, which is the next process, which is known as the interpretation process. Okay, in interpretation process, um, this one is the interpretation process. All the source codes are compiled line by line, okay, check line by line, and executable code is produced. I want you to know the difference between compilation and interpretation. Okay, in compilation, all the source codes are compiled at once. If there is error, no executable code is produced. If there is no error, code will be produced. But in interpretation process, if there are multiple lines of code, all the lines which are not having error will be interpreted and will be converted, but if there is error, it's not possible. Okay, so it is line by line. So let us compare what the difference between compiler and interpreter. Okay, compiler and interpreter. So in compiler, it takes the entire input. Okay, it takes the entire input. But in interpreter, it takes a single line of input, a single lines of input. But in the compiler, it generate intermediate code. Okay, it generate intermediate code, but in interpreter, it does not generate intermediate code. It does not generate. Okay, and in terms of memory, compiler required more memory because it needs to compile all the source code that you have, all the lines of the source code that you have written at once. But interpreter needs only less memory because it is compiling line by line. So in terms of error, the compiler display list of error, but in interpreter, it display error one by one. All right. These are the difference between compiler and interpreter, which is most commonly asked during exam. But let me tell you the main difference. The main difference is compiler compile source code at once, all the lines of the code at once, and if there is no error, it will produce object code and executable code. But if there is error, it will display list of error. But interpreter works differently. Interpreter will check line by line. It will check first line. If there is an error, no error, it will interpret, and it will go to the second line. If there is no error, it will interpret again. It will go to third line, and if there is no error, it will interpret again. If it will go to fourth line, if there is error, it will stop like that. Okay, so I want you to know the difference between interpreter and compiler. Do you have any questions, students? Yes, I already told you, if there is any questions, please don't hesitate to ask me. Okay, through WhatsApp.